Alright, welcome back to All Cars Y'all. I am John. It is time for another reaction video to a Motorweek retro review. This week, it is the 92 Ford Crown Victoria and Mercury Grand Marquis. And I appreciate my viewer who recommended I do this one. I thought that was actually a pretty good idea because I already know what I'm going to say. These cars are based on an old platform. They handle in a wallowing manner. The V8 makes not much power. The interior is cheap. None of it's stylish and none of it feels upscale. But I might be surprised, and I do have a personal story with one of these, is that the Crown Victoria, I think about 1996, probably, something like that. I was talking to a Ford dealer and they were talking about the Crown Vic and how much value the car offered. I remember him saying, like, look at this, and why would anyone buy a Honda Accord for the same price as what you can get right here with V8 power and all this space? And I remember it burned into my brain because it was one of those, like, they're not remotely the same. You know, the person who wants this big car that is kind of wallowy riding with a big V8 that doesn't make a lot of power, is not getting good gas mileage, is not the same person who's going to consider an Accord. So I do have a little bit of a story. I have driven these. I actually think they're super comfortable, but both of these fall into the it's okay, but it's not a Buick. So I'm curious to see what Motorweek thought of them.
Is made possible by Tire Rack.
No sooner did the big American car enjoy a resurgence in popularity than the Middle East again plunged into war. This created new concerns about energy supplies and had some analysts again predicting the extinction of Detroit's largest products. But big cars are far from dead. Take the Mercury Grand Marquis, for example. Both it and its cousin, this Ford Crown Victoria, are all new this year. And contrary to the popular image of full-size sedans being outdated dinosaurs, these cars contain some of Ford's newest technology. But can even Ford's best efforts assure a place for these big cars in the 1990s?
So before we go on, let's talk about the styling here, at least from the front. I'll have a different thought about the Mercury and the rear of them. You know, it's okay. I have a very love-hate relationship with these. I mean, first off, Ford 90s quality and interior materials. I'm sure we'll get to that. Outside, their styling was somewhere between okay and what the heck were they thinking. This falls on the solidly okay. It has, and GM had the same problem here, right? It has old proportions. It's big, but not, I don't know, it just doesn't quite work for me. I was a Buick guy at the time, and this Ford or this Mercury would not really have been there. And when I drove them, they were okay, but they never felt quite as rich, I guess, as the Buicks of the time. So it's okay styling. I think it's just anonymous, but it's, I guess what I'm thinking is when you take a big body and you put what amounts to, you know, almost Thunderbird headlights on it, you end up with something that has no real presence other than its size. And I think it's rather anonymous.
After all, it will be hard enough just finding a parking space for them. At almost 18 feet long, the Crown Victoria and Grand Marquis are two of the biggest cars on the American road.
Now, let me interrupt. Let's talk about the styling of the Marquis here. It's okay. I think it's actually pretty well done. That Ford struggled so much with separating Ford, Mercury, and Lincoln. I think this is a pretty nice example. In modern terms, narrow headlights are good, but the grille's not really big enough, and I kind of agree. This looks Overall, it looks a little thin, like for the size, it should have more presence, right? I do like that. I should do a whole video about my theory on grills, that there reached a point where manufacturers broke the plane of the bumper. I think Audi may have been the first to really do it, at least do it consistently in the modern era. And you can see here, this Mercury, they just barely broke the top of the bumper there with that grill. I think it looks good. I think the chrome is, in a lot of ways, surprisingly restrained. Who knew? I think it's handsome, but just doesn't have any kind of real presence. That's what I'm saying. That's what I'm saying, buddy.
While both cars are substantially redesigned, they retain body-on full-frame construction. They're being introduced as early 1992 models. The Crown Victoria is the sleeker of the two and wears what are by now easily recognized as Ford family lines. The curves start at the smooth Taurus-like nose and continue in an unbroken line across the flush glass greenhouse. They end at a conservative yet aerodynamic tail. Inside, the Crown Vic is clean and airy. The full-size 114-inch wheelbase carries over from the previous car and allows the Big Ford to be one of the few cars available today that can truthfully claim to be a 6-passenger sedan.
Okay, you can't tell me that back seat doesn't look comfortable. Come on.
Layout is straightforward with lots of imitation wood trim. The Ford has standard analog gauges that offer much more information than we're used to getting in a big American family car. This optional digital cluster is also available. Stereo and heat controls are simple to operate, but you have to reach a bit for them. Retaining the long wheel.
Okay, but before they move on to the back seat there, let's talk about that. Again, looking back nearly 30 years when I had experience with this, and certainly thinking about all the retro reviews I've done looking at old GMs or Chryslers where they put a bin and just, ergonomics were an afterthought. This kind of has some of the same flaws, where it's very linear and things are maybe a little too far away from you, but that is clean. And I've got to say, that aged far, far, far better than I thought it was going to. A lot of the older cars that I've done this reaction videos to, I remember the dash somewhat fondly, and then when you see pictures of it, you're like, what the heck were they thinking? This one, I'm not claiming it's perfect. I'm not claiming it's a Lexus or that it has, I don't know, Acura levels of ergonomics, but I'm saying that dashboard, that was clean and crisp and easy to read, and the controls looked pretty simple. Maybe they'll go into it a little bit more. I'm kind of impressed. This is really a lot nicer than I remember it in my brain. Wow.
Wheelbase means generous rear seat room. And while liftover is high, the deep 20.6 cubic foot trunk will easily swallow the biggest luggage. The Mercury Grand Marquis shares the same trunk and interior capacity, although the more upscale Grand Marquis has a simpler standard gauge package that offers only luxury car basics. Both Grand Marquis and Crown Victoria have a standard driver's side airbag and offer an optional one for the passenger. The Mercury split bench seat is wide and flat. Back support is good, but the bottom cushion is surprisingly hard for an American family car. Optional 6-way power adjustments tailor the fit to any driver. Dash layout is slightly different in the Mercury, with the ventilation controls placed higher so they're easier to reach. The power radio antenna must be raised and lowered by means of a switch on the dash, something that you had best remember before you go through an automatic car wash. Outside, the Grand Marquis features a more conservative yet still aerodynamic look. Both the large chrome grille and slightly more formal roofline mark it as a part of the Lincoln Mercury stable. While these cars may differ a bit in style.
So before they jump into the engines anymore, that Mercury, I don't know. I mean, it really speaks to me, as a matter of fact. When I think about my two Buicks that I had before this time period, I don't know, that horizontal speedometer right there, that speaks to me. And just everything about that really appealed to me. I didn't love the color, but I'm not a big fan of leather, so this cloth interior looks good, and I don't really miss my bench seat, I'll be honest with you, but I think I could really enjoy that car. I really do. And certainly as I've gotten older, I'm looking at a car like this and I totally get why somebody wants something like that. You feel big, you feel safe, you're comfortable, it rides smooth, you go to the grocery store and, hey, whatever. I get this car. I really do. And I'm surprised I like it as much as I do.
Styling, both are powered by the same engine. This 4.6-liter overhead cam V8 is the first product of Ford's modular engine program. It produces 190 horsepower and 260 pound-feet of torque, all with a smoothness that will surprise owners of previous big Fords. Buy the Grand Marquis optional handling package and you get a dual exhaust that boosts horsepower to 210. No one expects...
Not overwhelmingly impressed with 190 horsepower, but that torque figure is really good. And dual exhaust gets it up to 210. That's pretty impressive. I don't think the acceleration is going to be terribly impressive here because that's a lot of mass to be hauling around. But I like the modular V8s. I've heard criticism of them over the years, sure, and I'm not a mechanic, but my general impression is they were a big step forward for Ford, and I don't personally have any hesitation about them. Let's see how these things handle on the track.
It's a 3,800-pound car to be that quick, but the Grand Marquis still managed to find 9.3 seconds 0 to 60 at our test track. The quarter mile took 17.1 seconds, ending at 83 miles per hour. Power delivery is as smooth as that of certain Japanese V8 luxury cars. The 4-speed automatic transmission keeps the power flowing along to the rear wheels. Part of the chassis redesign included a new front suspension that substantially decreases the big car's tendency to wallow and roll in corners. There's now more usable grip, with the car feeling more like a mid-sized Taurus than last year's Grand Marquis. But the variable effort power steering, while offering sufficient feedback in most situations, is overridden in hard corners, requiring lots of muscle to control. The handling package includes the rear load leveling air suspension. It gives a soft but controlled ride and eliminated the expansion joint porpoising that we usually associate with this class of car. Interior sound measures a very low 63 decibels. Our test fuel mileage is 20 miles per gallon, with EPA estimates of 18 city, 25 highway. Four-wheel disc brakes are now standard on this platform, and ABS is optional. Our test car used that option to stop from 60 in a short 110 feet. The expected big car nosedive is very evident, but stability is good and the pedal feel plentiful. Despite the substantial improvements, prices have only increased an average of 2.7%. Crown Victoria base prices now range from $18,728 to $19,543. The Grand Marquis starts at $19,361 for the GS and goes to $19,789 for LS trim. That's half what you'll pay for the Lexus LS400. The big Fords match the Lexus in acceleration, even though they can't quite keep up in the corners. Both chassis offer lots of interior and trunk space, but the Ford's simpler dash may appeal more to traditional American car buyers. A more rational comparison would be to the Chevrolet Caprice. The 6-passenger Chevy actually costs less than the big Fords. It does, however, have very radical styling. The Caprice accelerates slower, but has similar handling and standard anti-lock brakes. Hits for the big Ford start with their modern yet tasteful styling. We also like the substantially improved handling, smooth new engine, roomy, efficient interior, and still affordable price. Misses are the easily overridden power steering, an overly hard seat bottom padding, and a power radio antenna that may not survive the first trip to the car wash. On our safety check, the Crown Victoria and Grand Marquis pass with a standard driver's side airbag and available passenger side airbag. They also have rear shoulder belts and optional anti-lock brakes. With their moderate price tags and vastly improved performance, the Ford Crown Victoria and Mercury Grand Marquis will surely appeal to a large number of family and luxury car buyers. Ford has successfully applied new technology to an old idea to come up with cars that should please both the traditionalist and the young up-and-coming buyer, thus expanding its customer base and guaranteeing that there will be full-size V8 Fords and Mercurys in the showrooms for at least the next decade.
All right, so I admit I am surprised at how positive that was. I'm also surprised at how positive my opinion is. Again, generally speaking, I think of the Panther platform as being very old, stretched out to the very end of its lifestyle, and Ford offering a product that there were a few people that wanted it, and it was so cheap to produce. It already had been paid off in the past. Why not continue to sell it? But this is surprisingly positive. New engine, 4-speed automatic, relatively okay acceleration, a smoothness to the engine that they compared to the Lexus, and a really let's not say a beautiful, radical, ergonomic leading interior, but very crisp and very clean. I'm pretty impressed. And certainly when they show that Caprice, I never liked the styling. When they redesigned the Caprice, they just made it bubulous, and it never quite did it for me. Now, back in '92, I was certainly not in the market for a car like this, but I think if I had been open enough to cross-shopping the Chevy and the Ford, I think I'd pick the Ford by a long shot. I don't think the Caprice is quite there in the same category. I'm going to look and see if they've got one. I can do a reaction video on them too. Maybe I'll feel differently. A few quirks here and there, but I'll be honest with you, other than this was more positive than I expected, my feelings about it are far more positive than I thought they were going to be. I expected I expected a gigantic, wallowing, slow, ancient Ford with a topaz interior. That's what I expected, okay? But now I'm looking at this and saying, wait a minute, with the high praise they gave, a smooth shifting transmission, the air suspension with the ride leveling, the smoothness of the engine, and some of the other stuff Ford was doing, doesn't it make you wish that Ford had the gumption, the cojones, to invest in a car that could stand toe-to-toe with that Lexus or the Infiniti Q? Imagine that modular V8 with what they just said about it in a right-sized, modern, unibody car instead of something body on frame like this. Oh, this whole video, the takeaway for me is a gigantic what could have been. Let me know your thoughts below, guys, but I appreciate you spending a few minutes here with me today. Thanks.